So there is this myth that most cancer is genetics. Only about, as you pointed out, 15 to 20% is genetics. And what it is are these inherited mutations. And we can't test for all these inherited mutations. And there are some kits that are available online, 23andMe, Ancestry, and they only check for a very limited number of these inherited mutations. And that's useful information to have. But if you test negative, that doesn't mean that you're still not at increased for some of these other variants. The best way to test for genetic history is to ask family members and to find out if someone died of cancer, what age they were, and what type. And if you see it in two or more people, then you may need to talk to a genetic counselor. And I also want to say you can do everything right that we've talked about, and you can still get cancer. That can still happen just by, unfortunate luck. The other issue is people used to think more so in the past that cancer was contagious, right? So you had to avoid people if they had cancer. But I point that out because there are some cancers, and I talk about it in the book, Take Control of Your Cancer Risk, that are viruses. The HPV virus, which can be involved in several types of cancers, head and neck cancer, cervical cancer, is a sexually transmitted virus, and we need to vaccinate against HPV. It's also for Hep B and Hep C. If you have either of those can increase your risk of cancer. Every now and then something will pop up on our feeds about microwaves and cell phones causing cancer. So, people can get obsessed about that where we don't have any data to show that that is the case. And they're not focused on the things that we're talking about today, where we do have much better association. Another myth that might be of interest to your audience is the belief that only women get breast cancer. Men can get breast cancer as well. And if they do feel something suspicious, they are going to have to be examined. And the other myth that I'd point out, and this occurs with a lot of cancers, people assume they'll have symptoms, right? So they'll know when to go, kind of like with a heart attack. I'll have chest pain, so then I'll know to go. Often when you have symptoms such as weight loss that's unexplained, your cancer often has advanced. So that's why screening is important as well.
So what's the recommendations on screening? Is there any general guidelines? I know that there's many
it
different
varies.
types of cancer.
It varies by specialty group in the U.S., and it varies a little bit around the world based on resources. But it really bases on people at average risk. So if you have a family member who died of cancer or diagnosed with cancer at an early age, then you need to be screened earlier. But for colon cancer, it's typically the different groups say either 45 or 50. For mammograms, it could be 40 or it could be 35, depending upon what group you're listening to. And then for prostate cancer, it's typically around 45 years of age. Now, for pancreatic cancer and some other cancers, we don't have screening for those cancers. Lung cancer is primarily based on your smoking history and the amount of time that you smoked. And really, people need to get screened for these cancers if they meet those criteria.
Yeah, it's just often, I feel like it's not really a focus or a scare when you're in your 30s and kind of just like living life and you feel a bit invincible. I guess 30s starting to feel a little bit like you're becoming less invincible, but I feel, and this is just my anecdotal experience, but when people start to do the screening and all that kind of stuff, I'm not going to say that it's too late, but often it's when their health is already at a place where they have reached the place where they need to do those screens because they're in a little bit of a, oh my gosh, I think it's, I've put on too much weight, or I haven't been training, and like, man, I'm stuck. How can we encourage people to think a bit forward and, get behind the idea of prevention is the best intervention?
Yeah. And for most cancers, we don't screen in the 30s because, as I talked about, most cancer is of aging. But remember, the other thing I want to point out is skin cancer. Skin cancer still is significant cancer, and some are malignant that can result in significant morbidity, including, scars and deformations. So that's something to think about as well. Brock, that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. How do we get people to change their mindset? We're kind of set up in healthcare as it's a sick care system, not a well care system. So we don't really focus on prevention. We don't incentivize doctors to talk about prevention. We don't pay for services that are associated with prevention. So it's really this mindset that we have to change with people that, sure, in your 30s, you're not thinking about, oh, like I want to still be living in my 70s and the 80s, but you also want to be living a quality life. You don't want to be associated with, morbidity and mortality and not being able to move. What I've been talking to people about lately in terms of exercise is I say, do you want to do cardiac rehab, which as you may know is primarily, diet and exercise after you have a heart attack? Or would you rather do it now? When you have more flexibility, more options, and you can prevent that heart attack to a large degree. But people tend not to think that way. I mean, you're very focused on health and wellness and know the benefit of it. And that's what we need to change people's mindset to. It's about wellness. How do you feel good? How do you, live longer, with a quality life? And it can be hard to do with the mixed messaging from media in terms of eating and drinking alcohol, and we just don't focus on it enough. And that's why I'm so glad you're having these conversations about the role of prevention, the role of wellness, the role of feeling good with healthy foods and exercise.
When I first thought of doing a podcast in 2019, I wrote down everything that I wanted to achieve with the show. And one thing I never wrote down was to spam you with ads of products that I never really used myself. However, I did write down that I wanted to grow it as big as possible and have as many interesting people on the show as I could. To help make that happen, all I ask is that you leave a review on the podcast platform that you're listening to this episode on and share it with someone that you know it will benefit. If you want to support myself even further, and more importantly, your body transformation, and are interested in having me as your coach to help you achieve the results that you just can't seem to achieve on your own, you can visit teambrockashby.com to see what program fits you best.
Yeah, I think as unfortunate and difficult it was to lose my mum at a young age to cancer, I also try to see the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the fact that I do see, I've had this perspective of looking at 90-year-old Brock looking back and, trying to see what his life would look like, because once you experience this, and I think a lot of people that have lost someone significant in their life will have this idea. Once you see the loss of life, you really understand the true value of life and the gift and the miracle and just the basic win you have every day just waking up, because some people do not have that privilege. And to look back from a future 90-year-old Brock that I don't even know. I don't even know if I'll make it to 90, but I pretend that I do, and I look back.
Good. Hope you do.
Yeah, so do I. But looking back from that, I think that's just such a powerful concept in all facets of life, but especially our health. So we need to think, okay, does 90-year-old Brock still walk? Yes, okay. So what does 80-year-old, 70-year-old, 60, 50, 40, 30-year-old Brock do to help make sure that that's a goal? And now, I can have goals of trying to squat this amount and, having legs X big. Not that that's really a goal of mine, but as you get older, these goals will mature. And I think as long as you have that kind of end destination where you reverse engineer your goal from, I think that's a really important thing for people to consider. And that's really hard to sell to a 20-year-old, I know, because they don't have that perspective. But I think that unfortunate circumstance that I had really helped me to see that. Along the lines of lifestyle, because that's kind of a separate thing to just training and food. Like lifestyle could be stress, it could be relationships, it could be, I don't know, career choice or fulfillment. How does that impact cancer prevention or our health in that way? Because, or even mental health as well. Like, what are the impacts? Because it feels so broad to me, and to be very honest, I'm not really sure what the correlations are between things like, stress and mental health with cancer.
Yeah, Brock, I think it's important for listeners to know there's no physical health without mental health. There really isn't. And there's no mental health without physical health. They're on a continuum, although in medicine we tend to put them in separate areas. I mean, we even have separate disciplines, but they really are integral. And, we've known it for centuries, the mind brain connection, but we don't, or the mind body connection, but we don't do anything about it. And I bring up the example of when you're not feeling well, if you think you have flu, what's the first thing that you do? You go to bed. You instinctively know the power of sleep to restore immune function. Now, everyone has stress in their lives. And, some stress is important. When you're in a dangerous situation or you need to get something done, some stress is good. It's the chronic stress, the stress on a daily basis that I see in patients that are impacting their activities of daily living, that are impacting, irritable bowel syndrome. People are coming in with nausea, diarrhea. They're having chest pain at a young age. Stress is that chronic inflammation, which is not good. It's causing an error in cell division. And the example I say that stress on our cells is, if I told you, oh, hey, you only need to make, 10 cookies for your child's school event tomorrow, right? But then I say, oh, wait, Brock, I was wrong. It's 100 and I need them tomorrow. What would happen? Some wouldn't look so good. Some wouldn't taste so good. You would make some mistakes as you had to get all of them done. And that's what's happening with your cells in cell division under a lot of stress. You're making mistakes, and some cells are going to become cancerous. That's the real issue with stress and cancer. And we have seen this time and time again through studies.
And you touched on sleep as well.
Mm-hmm.
How does that impact it? So obviously, I think that sleep has been growing in awareness,
Mm-hmm.
how people have
Absolutely.
been more aware of actually the benefits of it, recovery, especially from a
Mm-hmm.
sports perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like, I must be very honest, I'm not the best with sleep, and I have a big list of things to do per day. And as a young parent, I'm still trying to balance and someone that works for
Mm-hmm.
himself, to be very honest, I'm still very much balancing time management and within time management comes sleep management, because that
Sure.
does take up a portion of time. And I used to have an unhealthy relationship when I was younger and look at it as a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've definitely changed my perspective on that. It's not a waste of time. It's actually a good use of time. What role does it play in terms of our cancer risk?
And, we have these sleep trackers now. I don't know if you have one on, either a ring or a watch. I see
got a
you showing
Fitbit.
your watch. I have a Fitbit on as well. And I do track my sleep. I don't get preoccupied by it. And, I have a whole chapter in the book about sleep. And, Brock, I have to say, I still don't think you have the right perspective on sleep, because, it is kind of that bravado that's often in medicine, and you're talking about in your own life. Oh, I don't need sleep. I'll sleep enough when I'm dead. Or, sleep is only, for those people that are weak. I'm fine on 4 hours sleep. Guess what? You're not fine on 4 hours of sleep. It might work 1 or 2 times, but you do that on a continuous basis. It is going to add up in terms of the health benefits. And the reason why is that sleep really is the work of multiple hormones that are important in our body. The main ones are cortisol and melatonin. There's also orexin and some others. So, cortisol is what helps us wake up in the morning, and then later at night it goes down, whereas melatonin is really impacted by light, and it signals to our brain when it's getting dark that it's time to go to sleep. When you mess up that rhythm, that circadian rhythm that we refer to, that is going to cause problems later on. And we actually have seen, and I talk about it in the book, in shift workers, people that work these unusual hours late at night, an increase in certain type of hormonal cancers, particularly prostate and breast cancer. And some countries of the world have actually compensated shift workers who have gotten cancer, because we think it's relating to this, messing up of these hormones. And what is frustrating, and I get it, you have a lot to do. And sleep is always the lowest priority. And you think, I'll get to it later in life. And I used to say, what's the one thing that you can start doing today to reduce your cancer risk? It's actually getting more quality sleep. But that's something, Brock, that will catch up to you over time. And it is hard, and it's really hard with a newborn. And, that might be the case for several months, but it's about time management. It's about realizing, what's important. People do need sleep. And you instinctively know it's important to have recovery from heavy lifting days. Why is that? Why is that necessary for your body to physically recover? Why don't you think I'm being, rhetorical. Why don't you think it's necessary for your brain to recover? Sleep is not putting your computer in sleep mode. It's really about cleaning out your brain, getting rid of these free radicals. There's a lot going on while you sleep. So sleep does play an important role.